Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI360. Now, for so long, there's been clamors for financial autonomy for state houses of assembly and the judiciary, with all efforts to do so hitting a brick wall. But a new era seems to have now begun for state legislature, owing to the new Executive Order 10, which was recently signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari. The new law makes it mandatory for all states of the Federation that all states of the Federation now should include the allocations of both the legislature and the judiciary in their states now in their appropriation laws, meaning that the legislative and judicial arms of government in all Nigeria's 36 states, including the Federal Capital Territory, of course, will no longer have to wait on state governors for funds. It also states that the Accountant General of the Federation shall authorize the deduction of the monies from Federation accounts allocation to any state that fails to comply with the new order. Joining me now to discuss this more is the spokesperson of the Senate, Senator Ajibola Bashir. Senator, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We've had a lot of people say the executive order, that the president probably overreached himself by signing that executive order. What's your take on this issue?
I think since the president has signed the executive order, there's a presumption of regularity in law, which means that the order remains positive and valid until set aside by a competent court of law. So one will expect that the antagonist of the executive order should rather approach a court of law if they feel strongly about its unconstitutionality or that the president lacked the virus or the power to sign the executive order. It is not open again to issue of a debate or issue of a media campaign. So the order has been signed. It's expected to be executed. And for those who feel strongly about its legality, the option for them is to go to court. And I also read earlier today that the governors at their meeting yesterday had said that they want to have a meeting on the order, possibly with a view to implementation of the order. So one expects that any strong view against the order should be a matter of litigation.
But don't you, in all honesty, think it would be absolutely unnecessary to challenge this order? Because the truth is that the Constitution specifically provides for the independence of state judiciary and the state legislature. And that what we have seen all this while is that the governors have basically been breaching that section of the Constitution, and that what basically the president has done is just to ensure that that section of the Constitution is enforced. So he's like giving it a teeth. So the question is, why would anybody want to challenge this, since it's a provision of the Constitution?
There could be many reasons why people may want to challenge. Why not standing as advocate for the governors? They may well, in their own interpretation of the relevant provision of the Constitution, think it may be challenged. But if it is about the practicality and the usefulness of the executive order, it is very important to say that for the purpose of advancement of democracy and rule of law, the executive order and assuring that the legislative arm and the judicial arm have financial autonomy is a big plus for democracy. I'm someone who had worked at the level of executive before, being a two-term commissioner in the state of Osun. So I will say that now I'm in the legislative arm at the federal level. I will say that the legislative arm at the federal level, we have a better leeway in terms of independence because of financial autonomy, which has already been established at the federal level. But on the contrary, it will appear that many state legislators, they are always at the whims and caprices of the executive arm as to whether they will even get their basic entitlement. The same thing for judiciary. I was an attorney general of the state, and I discovered that it may well pretty be difficult in terms of prioritization to get things done in judiciary, even though the governor may be well-meaning, but because of the myriads of challenges and demands on the executive, they may well prioritize their own priority project at the detriment of development of the other sector of the government. And as I said, the only way you can ensure separation of powers, although with interdependence as is required under the concept of that separation of power, the issue of financial autonomy is very at the heart of ensuring that we have a government where checks and balances can be assured.
And do you think for the governors, this is more like power has been taken away from them? That, look, it's not just a question of, guaranteeing the independence of the legislature and the judiciary in their state, but it's more like power being taken away from them. They may not have the kind of clout, for instance, they have over the legislature in their state and, of course, the judiciary.
Not really about a clout. I would say possibly what they usually call tough protection is the issue. And when there's a change, there's always resistance to change. But I think the question of clout and it would depend on the interplay of the politics in each state, particularly if it's a state where the executive and legislature belongs to the same political party. Irrespective of financial autonomy, I will not see whether there will be any friction. But in a situation whereby there are divergent political views in the state, it may well be able to ventilate that opposition and then a critical engagement. When you realize, DG, that the interplay of democratic forces is in terms of relationship and being able to aggregate consensus, I think it will deepen a consensus-driven government and may also entrench bipartisan government in a state where there are different political parties holding the executive and legislative arm. And for judiciary, there can never be a time that you need independence of judiciary reflected in financial autonomy. You cannot ask an arm that's supposed to be a watchdog on legality, constitutionality, and appropriateness of the action of executive relying and going cap in hand to ask for basic things, even to run the organization of the courts. And just as I said at the floor of the Senate yesterday, the judiciary is particularly endangered by the incident of COVID-19, and there's a need to ensure that they have appropriate resources to develop infrastructure, appropriate resources to go and implement the virtual hearing that has been embedded in many practice direction issued by the head of court in the wake of pandemic of COVID-19.
Let me just quickly ask you this, and it's just like asking you the same question I asked you just now, but in a different way now. Does this financial autonomy guarantee, or does it translate to political autonomy, so to speak, for the legislature in the state and the judiciary?
As I said, there's a difference between political interplay and the issue of financial autonomy. And you have to look at in the context of the leadership of the executive. If you have an executive that has a way of building consensus among legislative arm, there will not be an issue about financial autonomy. And so the only thing is that it will be the legislator will become a self-respecting and dignified institution when they can be assured their allowances, their overhead, and their capital is assured irrespective of the whims and caprices of the leader of the executive. And of course, what even the concept of separation of power means is not a rigid separation of the three arms of government, but for each arm of government to be able to function within its area of competence. Of course, there will be interdependence and interrelationship among the arms of government. But of particular importance in this regard, when it comes to the executive and legislative arm, they are creatures of political institution. They are creatures of democratic aspiration and expression of the people. But when it comes to judiciary, it's an institution that is expected to be independent, to be able to dispense justice without fear of favor, affection, or ill will. And as I've said at many fora, the issue of rule of law is very critical to the attainment of genuine development in our society. When rule of law are followed, you will ensure that all legislations, all policies aimed at uplifting the people will be upheld, and you can be sure there's a watchdog that can be able to tell the power that be that this is the right thing to do. And then the question of oppression and the infraction of human rights would be upheld. So I think this is a right step in ensuring that we further entrench our democracy. For the past 21 years, we have made some progress, but of course, this new development will ensure that we further entrench the necessary autonomy to ensure that checks and balances, as envisaged by the concept of separation of power, is actually practiced in reality.
All right, Senator Ajibola Bashir, spokesperson of the Senate, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
You are welcome.
We'll take a short break and we'll be right back to continue the discussion on this subject. On DEJI360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent. Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country.
I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly.
God forbid that I go to join that planet.
DEJI360, providing clarity to issues.